Somebody says, I can read the writing on the wall. Well, do you know that that's Daniel 5:25?
Okay, so that's Eric Weinstein sort of waxing biblical in a recent podcast with Chris Williamson. And over there, he's making a larger point about the sort of nagging relevancy of religion, particularly the Hebrew Bible, in our lives, even if we try to ignore it. I made a recent video also with clips from this same conversation where Eric Weinstein was telling a story about playing some Jewish music. And I mentioned how annoyed I was that I didn't know which songs. He didn't mention the set list. What was he playing? Well, I have a surprise for you. At the end of this video, I'm going to reveal to you, I have inside information what Jewish songs Eric Weinstein was playing. Okay, what I want to do first is set up this clip. Short clip here, Eric Weinstein talking about the proverbial writing on the wall and its biblical origin, also sliding into some really fluent Aramaic, just sort of spontaneously. Let's check it out.
They don't know how much of their life comes from Scripture. You have a round of firings at a company. Somebody says, I can read the writing on the wall. Well, do you know that that's Daniel 5:25? Do you know what the wall says? Many, many tekel ufarsin. You've been measured and found wanting. Your lands will be distributed to the Persians or something like that.
Okay, so first of all, that was pretty cool, just watching Eric Weinstein slide into that Aramaic. And by the way, that was Aramaic. I'll explain that the book of Daniel, although it's part of the Hebrew Bible, it's part of the 24 books of Tanakh, which itself is an acronym for Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim. Torah means the 5 books of Moses. Nevi'im means the prophets. Ksuvim means the writings, and the book of Daniel is one of those books of what we call writings, but it's in Aramaic. And it actually takes place in the Babylonian exile, where the Babylonians were speaking Aramaic. So the story's like this. The Babylonian king who destroyed the first temple was, and I'm going to use the Hebrew pronunciation from the actual text of the Hebrew Bible. You might be more familiar with anglicized versions of these names, but for the purpose of authenticity and also so I don't trip over my own tongue, I'm going to use the biblical proper nouns. So there is Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of the Babylonian Empire. He destroyed the first temple and sent the Jewish people into exile. It was a common thing then that when you destroyed a nation, not only would you lay waste to it, but you would take the best and the brightest and move them. So they were moved to Babylonia, which is basically modern-day Iraq. The truth is that the Jewish people have a history in Iraq before this happens, because Avraham, or I'll say the anglicized version, Abraham, originally was from Ur-Kasdim, which was the capital of the original Babylonian Empire. I should mention that Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian Empire is actually what historians call the Neo-Babylonians. The original Babylonians, that was Nimrod, or Nimrod, which I think Bugs Bunny made famous, the name Nimrod. It sort of turned it into a pejorative slang. So Abraham, or Avraham, originally came from there and then went to what was then called Canaan, or Canaan, and later became Eretz Yisrael, or the land of Israel. So at any rate, when the Jewish people were sent into exile into what is geographically, it's called Mesopotamia, it's the Fertile Crescent, the area between the Tigris and Euphrates, they were in a way sort of going back to a place where they had come from. I mean, albeit many, many generations before. Okay, so Daniel, and that's the Hebrew pronunciation of Daniel, at least in my accent. Daniel was from the tribe of Yehuda, or Judah, which is the tribe of kingship. David HaMelech, or King David, comes from that tribe. So Daniel, and I'm going to use that word instead of Daniel from now on, Daniel became one of the advisors to the king, to Nebuchadnezzar, along with 3 other smart Jewish boys named Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. You may also know them by their Babylonian names. They were given by Nebuchadnezzar Babylonian names. And here I actually will use the anglicized version, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego.
There was 3 children from the land of Israel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Took a trip to the land of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego.
So whether you know it from Louis Armstrong, or you know it from the Beastie Boys, or you know it from somewhere else, it's a fairly well-known thing. But their original Hebrew names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Isaiah, and there's a famous story where they refused to bow down to the idol of Nebuchadnezzar, and they were thrown into a fiery furnace, and they miraculously emerged unscathed. So we're talking about later, after Nebuchadnezzar lost his kingdom, a few kings later, we have Belshazzar, or Balthazar. Belshazzar. So he was either the son or the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, and he threw a party. Now, kings were always throwing parties, wild bacchanalians, but in this particular case, he threw the party to celebrate what he thought was the fact that the exile of the Jewish people had expired. It was forecast that the exile would last for 70 years. According to his calculations, that time had passed, which to him meant that they would never be returned to their homeland. So he wanted to celebrate that. And what did he do? He took out the vessels, the gold and the silver of the Holy Temple, which were ransacked by his predecessor, by Nebuchadnezzar, when he destroyed the first temple. So all of the vessels of the temple were brought to Babylonia, and Belshazzar, as the successor of Nebuchadnezzar, had those in his treasure house. He brought them out and he used them as serving utensils. That didn't go unnoticed on high. So all of a sudden at this party, a disembodied hand appears out of nowhere and starts writing on the wall. As if that's not disturbing and troubling enough, nobody could decipher what the message that was written on the wall said. So the queen, there's different interpretations which queen it was. Maybe it was the queen mother, maybe it was Belshazzar's wife. But the queen tells him, go get Daniel. Daniel actually interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream. There's a famous dream of the statue, which he interpreted. So Daniel was known as a smart guy. It's similar, by the way, to another smart Jewish boy many, many generations earlier, Yosef, or Joseph, the biblical Joseph, who interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh. At any rate, they bring out Daniel, and he's able to decode the message on the wall. This here is Rembrandt's rendition, and I'm not vouching for the accuracy of anything else, but the letters are not bad. And he accurately depicts, at least according to one Talmudic interpretation, what was confusing about the configuration of the letters. Okay, so I should explain to you. Rembrandt had a friend, Menashe ben Yisrael. Menashe ben Yisrael was a Sephardic Jew who lived in Holland. His family left after the Portuguese Inquisition. Many people know about the Spanish Inquisition. There was also an Inquisition in Portugal. His family went to Holland, where there was relatively more religious freedom, and he was friends with Rembrandt, and he consulted with Rembrandt. This Menashe ben Yisrael was not only a rabbi and an author, but he also owned a printing press, which was the first Hebrew language printing press in Holland. He also famously was the teacher of Baruch Spinoza. So Rembrandt had his rabbinic advisor, basically, on this painting and perhaps on many works. But here you see, this is why they couldn't read the words. That even if they knew the Hebrew, it wasn't written across, it was written vertically. By the way, there's a whole subreddit devoted to signs which are confusing precisely for this very reason, that they're written vertically. And here's a bunch of humorous examples of that you can see here. So it was basically that thing, and they couldn't figure out what it said. Daniel showed up, and he figured out, oh, you don't read it across, you read it in columns. It's written as 4 columns. And if you read it vertically, it says, Minei, Tekel, Ufarsin. I'll say that again. Minei, Tekel ufarsin. What does that mean? So minei, that word is twice. Minei means you've been counted, meaning, let's say ominously, your days are numbered or your days are up. That word minei, by the way, is similar to, if you're familiar with Jewish prayer, where you get together a minyan. A minyan means a quorum required to say communal prayer. It literally means a number. So minei is that word of number. Your days are numbered. Minei, you've been counted up. Tekel means you've been weighed. Now I'll explain something. It is very common that a word which in Hebrew has the letter shin, which is that phoneme, like the SH sound in English, when the equivalent word appears in Aramaic, it'll be replaced with the letter tuf, which is like a T sound in English. So that word tekel is actually the same as the Hebrew word shoikel, which means to weigh, which is related to the word shekel, like a coin, which means a certain weight, right? Currency, at least in the ancient world, was all based on weight. So tekel means you've been weighed. That's not to be confused with Method Man's tekel, by the way. And the last word is upharsin. Upharsin is actually a pun. So when you're learning the Hebrew Bible in its original, there are many commentaries written by great rabbis through the centuries and the millennia. One of the great commentaries is the Ibn Ezra. You'll notice that Arabic there, Ibn rather than Ben. And that's because the Ibn Ezra lived in Spain, but it was an area and a time that was ruled by Muslims. So he was known as the Ibn Ezra, the son of Ezra. And he lived in the 1100s. He was a great rabbi, and he was also a genius in all of the sciences of his day. He was known as an astronomer. And in fact, there is a crater on the moon named after the Ibn Ezra. It is moon crater Aben Ezra. So the Ibn Ezra explains that the word upharsin is a pun. One layer of meaning is it's a reference to Paras, which is the biblical name for Persia. They're cognates, it's basically the same name. So it's saying you've been numbered and weighed. The Persians are going to come displace you. The Neo-Babylonians were then conquered and displaced by the Persians. And indeed, that very night, later that night, the night of the party, Belshazzar was murdered in his own palace. There was a whole mix-up that he was, whether it was intentional or it was an accident, but he gave strict orders that no one is to be allowed admittance to the palace. He left the palace, he tried to get back in, and he was killed. So he died that very night. And then he was replaced by the Persian and Median empires. So you have Darius or Daryovish from the Median Empire and Cyrus or Koresh from the Persian Empire, and they supplanted the Neo-Babylonians. Everyone in the palace was killed except for Belshazzar's daughter, Vashti. Those who know the Purim story, you may know that Vashti later became the first queen of Ahasuerus, or Ahasuerus. I can't say the anglicized versions. At any rate, that's what happened that night, and Persia replaced the Neo-Babylonian Empire. So that's one layer of meaning. All right. But as the Ibn Ezra explains, that same word, upharsin, is also related to the word prusa, which means a piece. Like if you cut a loaf of bread and you cut off a slice, it's called a prusa. So it also means you'll be divided. So it means you've been counted and weighed, and there's this double meaning pun, and you will be divided, meaning your empire is going to be sliced up and given to the Persians. So that one word, upharsin, has both meanings, to be sliced up and to be replaced by the Persians. Now, I promised you another thing, that we would reveal what repertoire was Eric Weinstein playing on that train car in the Ukraine. If you want to hear that whole story, you have to watch my other video. I'm not going to replay that clip here, but if you want to know what music he was playing, which songs he was playing, I have the answer for you from an irrefutable source. That was pretty exciting to have him stop by in the comments. And also there's a discussion, maybe, just maybe, we'll sit down together and talk some more about some of these themes. I'm hoping to be able to follow up on that. That would definitely be something that I would thoroughly enjoy.
Hey, did the algorithm do a good job bringing you to this channel? Check out these two videos, like this video, comment on this video, subscribe to this channel. All of that's going to help the algorithm to help you to enjoy your YouTube experience more.